Hello kids and folks. In this video we'll go over what you should do if you ever find yourself stranded on an island. Chances are you'll die for some dumb reason on this island, and they'll find you as a museum exhibit. There are, however, some theoretically interesting ways to survive, especially if the island has natives. You might be able to use gestures and other tricks to convince them that you're a god, and teach them all sorts of new things. If it works, you could end up living a long life among them. And if not, well, at least you can make your final days more interesting than your life before. Here's what you'll theoretically need for that. Solid survival knowledge, like how to build a shelter, find food, and defend yourself. Also good logical thinking, which people seem to lack these days. Especially those who devalue men, women, or both. If you find yourself stranded on an island with no idea where to start, take a moment to sit down and reflect on how much of an idiot you are for ending up in this situation. Take a walk around the island. If you're lucky, it might be a tourist island and everything will be fine. If not, then... First, check yourself for injuries. In emergency situations, people often panic and don't notice they're bleeding. If you are, don't rush to rinse the wound with water. Only do so if it's dirty, and even then, the water probably isn't sterile. Instead, bandage the wound tightly, preferably closer to the body if it's deep. You can also stop the bleeding by elevating the limb or applying a tourniquet if the wound is very deep. Either way, you might be screwed. Now the essentials. Don't scream for help right away. You don't know who else is on the island. If you've got any tools, consider it a divine gift. If not, look for stones that fit well in your hand. You can also smash one stone against another along its natural fracture lines. One will break and become sharp. It's primitive but still a weapon, and it might help you defend yourself. Every island has its own ecosystem. There are herbivores you can hunt for food and predators that wouldn't mind eating you. If you stumble upon some appetizing-looking fruit while exploring, don't rush to eat it. Watch if any animals eat it first. If none do, take a small piece, rub it on your skin, and then place a bit in your mouth. But just chew, don't swallow. If your hand swells, your mouth goes numb, or you feel any burning sensation, spit it out immediately. No need to take unnecessary risks. You won't last long in this paradise without it. Now, let's talk about water. Sure, islands are surrounded by water, but drinkable water is rare. Even small rainwater pools can have more living organisms than there are molecules per square meter in space. If you're lucky enough to find a container, collect water in it. If not, drinking directly from a source might help in the short term, but only until the local microbes kick in and wreck you. There are many ways to purify water. You can let it sit in the sun, boil it, or filter it. In theory, it's easier to take seawater, filter it through fabric, and boil it to remove the salt than to trust river water. Salt water naturally acts as a barrier to many microorganisms, making it somewhat cleaner. You could try hunting small or medium-sized game, but let's be honest, your average internet user who sits online for 12 hours a day probably won't manage that. In a worst-case scenario, you can catch insects or find edible roots. After that, all you can do is wait and hope that a passing ship rescues you. Your best bet is to make a large fire and throw in anything that can create a massive smoke column. If they see it, they might save you, or maybe not. Either way, I hope this guide is completely useless to you because you never end up in such a situation. Good luck! Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. This is my first video, and your support will determine my motivation to keep going.